love something or hate something until you have knowledge of it. Let's look into what that means a little bit, and an idea that goes with that is, if you have something and it can be taken from you, do you really have it? Something to consider. I mean, you can think you have something. So if you have something, but it can be taken from you, do you or did you really have it? Really? The Peacekeeper archetype, that role that we're talking about, has within it some paradox, some contradiction, some tension, and part of that has to do with the dual role of being familiar with peace and conflict. And I'm getting ahead a little bit because I want to define some stuff with you guys. There's a lot of things that we take for granted, or just kind of assume in our language and in our thinking, that for the depth of the conversation I want to get into, just is insufficient. The everyday assumptions that we have, because the nature of what we're talking about is so deep and so woven into our everyday paradigm. And I'm speaking "our" as in Western humans. Even grounded, healthy, evolved, conscious Western humans, it's so deep, it's so in our language, that there's a conflict built in, and it runs super deep. It's very hard to get away from in ordinary thinking without a little bit of, or quite a bit of, awareness and practice. And when I say that, I'm also going to say, with the caveat, there's nothing wrong. It just doesn't serve us all the time. I want to be careful how quickly we jump into some of these ideas, because our natural way of thinking and our worldviews, our paradigm, is trained deeply in contradiction to it, in a way that we run right past it, if we even notice it at all. I think there's a reason it's kind of elusive and like hyper obvious in a way. It's like elusive, like water to a fish. Conflict is natural, but nature is peaceful. In order to justify that claim, though, in doing some research for this and really kind of trying to figure out what the heck peace was. Not that I have it completely figured out, but I have a satisfactory, useful answer that was inspired by looking cross-culturally at some other, how peace shows up in other languages, and historically where the word comes from and all of that. But essentially, what I was finding is it comes from, it refers to a state of wholeness. Almost like a state of integrity or working state, a state of function where things are harmonious and working well. It's more active than I was anticipating. So I feel like that's how I can claim anyway that conflict's natural, but nature is peaceful. The state of things overall at, if you want to go real big or over time or whatever, is this like wholeness. The state of nature is wholeness. It's what we call oneness. That's what it is, you know. And it includes conflict, because that happens in there, and in its constructive forms, it's necessary. But just in the background, I wanted to explain that reference for peace, because it shifts to me what the role of the peacekeeper is, and it actually makes it, for me, way simpler. Like, oh crap, okay, that's way easier, because you're not trying to do something that isn't already there, you know. It's the state of nature. You're not trying to add anything. You don't have to know stuff. Not much. Conflict in the sense that matters to us in terms of if we get down to the scale of interpersonal conflict, human level, you know, that's the exception. Certainly part of the process, part of the story, fits right in that sense. It's part of oneness. You can't have oneness and conflict, because that's two-ness. So wholeness includes these states, and one of those states is conflict. But it's certainly, the reason I'm kind of spending some time on that is what I've noticed for me is peace is described as the absence of conflict. I'm like, whoa, that does not do it justice. Defining it as in fact, it's in the dictionary, you know, it's the absence of conflict, the absence of struggle, defining it by what it is not, right? By this exception, versus it's the fundamental state of wholeness, and conflict is the exception.